The highway patrol officer was certain the black driver was hiding something and began an aggressive search of his vehicle. But when backup arrived and recognized the man as Detective Morrison from Internal Affairs, the officer realized he had just been caught red-handed violating department protocol.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The late evening sun cast long shadows across Interstate 285 as Detective Marcus Morrison drove his unmarked sedan along the highway's outer loop, conducting what appeared to be a routine commute home from work. At 38, Morrison had spent the last 12 years with the state police, the past 5 as a detective with the Internal Affairs Division, investigating allegations of misconduct, corruption, and policy violations within law enforcement agencies across the state. Tonight's drive served a dual purpose. Morrison was returning home from a training conference on police accountability, but he was also conducting an informal assessment of highway patrol operations during evening hours. Recent complaints about aggressive traffic enforcement and potential racial profiling had prompted Internal Affairs to increase their monitoring of roadway interactions between officers and civilians. Morrison's vehicle, a modest 4-year-old Honda Accord, was deliberately chosen to blend in with typical civilian traffic. His casual clothing and the absence of any visible law enforcement indicators meant that patrol officers would interact with him as they would any ordinary citizen, providing authentic insight into their professional conduct and adherence to department policies. State Trooper Kevin Davis was completing his 6th hour of highway patrol duty, monitoring traffic along a stretch of I-285 known for drug trafficking and other criminal activity. At 29, Davis had been with the state police for 4 years, earning commendations for drug interdiction and criminal apprehension that had bolstered his confidence in his ability to identify suspicious behavior and potential criminal activity. Davis's approach to traffic enforcement was aggressive and intuitive, relying heavily on his assessment of driver behavior, vehicle characteristics, and demographic factors that he believed correlated with criminal activity. His success rate in discovering contraband and making arrests had earned him recognition within the department, though it had also generated several civilian complaints about excessive force and discriminatory treatment. When Davis observed Morrison's Honda traveling in the right lane at exactly the speed limit, several factors triggered his suspicion. The driver's careful adherence to traffic laws seemed unusual for the time of day. His vehicle appeared older than typical for the affluent area, and Davis's profile of potential drug traffickers included young black males traveling alone during evening hours. Davis activated his patrol car's emergency lights and initiated a traffic stop, pulling behind Morrison's Honda as it moved to the shoulder of the highway. Through his windshield, Davis could see a black male in casual clothing who appeared calm and composed, despite being stopped by police. Morrison checked his rearview mirror and pulled over safely, immediately recognizing the traffic stop as an opportunity to observe police procedure firsthand. As an internal affairs detective, Morrison was thoroughly familiar with proper protocols for traffic enforcement, constitutional limitations on police searches, and the legal standards that governed officer behavior during civilian encounters. Trooper Davis approached Morrison's vehicle with heightened caution, his hand positioned near his service weapon as he assessed the situation. The driver's apparent composure and direct eye contact seemed suspicious to Davis, who interpreted these behaviors as potential indicators of criminal experience or defiance. "Good evening," Morrison said respectfully as Davis reached the driver's side window. "Is there a problem, officer?" Davis studied Morrison's appearance and demeanor, looking for signs of nervousness, deception, or criminal intent. "License and registration. I stopped you for suspicious driving behavior." Morrison was intrigued by the vague justification for the traffic stop. "Suspicious driving behavior? Can you be more specific about what I did wrong?" Davis interpreted the question as a challenge to his authority. I'll ask the questions here. You were driving in a manner consistent with someone attempting to avoid law enforcement attention. Morrison recognized that Davis's explanation lacked the specific legal justification required for a traffic stop, but he remained cooperative while mentally documenting the interaction. Officer, I was following all traffic laws and driving at the posted speed limit. Davis became more suspicious of Morrison's articulate responses and apparent familiarity with legal concepts. Step out of the vehicle. I need to conduct a safety search. Morrison complied with the instruction while noting that Davis had not articulated any specific safety concerns that would justify removing him from the car. Officer, may I ask what safety issue you're addressing? Davis was becoming irritated by Morrison's questions. You're asking too many questions for someone who's supposed to be cooperating with a police investigation. Morrison stepped out of his Honda and stood beside the vehicle, maintaining a respectful demeanor while observing Davis's increasingly aggressive approach to what should have been a routine traffic encounter. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle, Davis commanded, beginning a pat-down search without explaining the legal basis for the procedure. Morrison complied while noting that Davis had not identified any weapons, contraband, or behavior that would justify a search under Fourth Amendment protections. Officer, what specific crime do you suspect me of committing? Davis was now convinced that Morrison's knowledge of police procedure indicated criminal experience. You know an awful lot about police work for a regular citizen. Have you been arrested before? The question revealed Davis's assumption that Morrison's familiarity with legal concepts suggested a criminal background rather than professional knowledge. I'm familiar with constitutional law, Morrison replied calmly. Every citizen should understand their rights during police encounters. Davis completed the pat-down and turned his attention to Morrison's vehicle. I'm going to search your car for weapons and contraband. Morrison recognized that Davis lacked probable cause for a vehicle search. Officer, do you have a warrant or probable cause to search my vehicle? Davis was now fully committed to his aggressive approach. I don't need a warrant when I have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Morrison understood that Davis was conflating different legal standards and exceeding his constitutional authority. What specific facts give you reasonable suspicion? Davis began searching Morrison's Honda without providing a satisfactory answer, examining the interior, glove compartment, and center console while looking for drugs, weapons, or other evidence of criminal activity. During the search, Davis discovered Morrison's police identification and internal affairs credentials in the glove compartment. He stared at the badge and ID card with growing confusion and alarm. "You're a cop?" Davis asked, his voice betraying his shock. Morrison looked directly at Davis. "I'm Detective Marcus Morrison, Internal Affairs Division, and you've just conducted an illegal search of my vehicle." Davis felt his confidence evaporating as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "Internal Affairs? Why didn't you identify yourself?" Morrison remained calm. "Officer Davis, I was conducting an informal assessment of traffic enforcement procedures. You've provided an excellent example of constitutional violations and improper police conduct." Davis was beginning to understand that his aggressive tactics had been observed and documented by the very division responsible for investigating police misconduct. "Sir, I was just doing my job." Morrison shook his head. "Officer Davis, you conducted a traffic stop without probable cause, performed an illegal search without constitutional justification, and violated multiple department policies regarding civilian interactions." Davis tried to justify his actions. "I thought you were acting suspicious." Morrison pulled out his phone and stopped a recording that had been running throughout the encounter. "I've documented this entire stop, including your failure to articulate legal justification for your actions." Davis stared at the phone with horror, realizing that his misconduct had been recorded by Internal Affairs. At that moment, another patrol car arrived as backup, responding to Davis's earlier request for assistance. Sergeant Williams stepped out of his vehicle and immediately recognized Morrison from department meetings. "Detective Morrison," Sergeant Williams called out, his voice reflecting confusion about why an Internal Affairs detective was involved in a traffic stop. Morrison turned to address the sergeant. "Sergeant Williams, I've just been subjected to an illegal traffic stop and search by Officer Davis." Sergeant Williams looked from Morrison to Davis, quickly understanding the serious implications of the situation. "Officer Davis, what's your justification for this stop?" Davis struggled to provide a coherent explanation. The subject was driving suspiciously and appeared to be avoiding law enforcement. Morrison addressed Sergeant Williams directly. "Sergeant, Officer Davis stopped me without probable cause, conducted an illegal search of my vehicle, and violated multiple constitutional protections. The entire encounter has been recorded." Sergeant Williams realized he was witnessing a major internal affairs incident involving one of his officers. "Detective Morrison, I apologize for this situation. Officer Davis, return to your patrol car immediately." Davis walked back to his vehicle, his career prospects flashing before his eyes. Morrison spent the next 20 minutes explaining the constitutional violations and policy breaches he had observed, while Sergeant Williams documented the incident for formal reporting to Internal Affairs. The recorded traffic stop became evidence in a comprehensive investigation of Davis's traffic enforcement practices, revealing a pattern of constitutional violations and discriminatory treatment of minority drivers. Davis was suspended pending investigation and ultimately faced disciplinary action that included retraining on constitutional law, bias awareness education, and probationary status that would affect his career advancement. Morrison's report led to department-wide training on proper traffic stop procedures, constitutional limitations on police searches, and the importance of treating all citizens with respect, regardless of their appearance or demographics. The incident became a case study in police training programs, demonstrating how aggressive enforcement tactics can violate citizens' rights and expose departments to legal liability. Sergeant Williams implemented additional supervision protocols for traffic enforcement, requiring officers to document specific legal justifications for stops and searches. Morrison continued his internal affairs work with a deeper understanding of how constitutional violations affect community trust and police legitimacy. The Highway Patrol Division revised its policies on traffic enforcement, emphasizing constitutional compliance and respectful treatment of all citizens. And Officer Davis learned that in law enforcement, assumptions about criminal behavior based on race and appearance can destroy careers and violate the oath to protect and serve all citizens equally. Because sometimes the most important investigations happen not in conference rooms, but on the highways where constitutional rights are either protected or violated by the very people sworn to uphold them.